So Dan, tell us about, this is a your mill, but how did it get started in here in Fort Kent?
Well, as far as I know, the first owner his name was Joe Corivo. And like I said, as far as I know, I think he owned it for about 20 years. And that would have brought you back in maybe the early 50s, late 40s. And then a man by the name of June Gaillon owned this for 2 years after Joe had it. And my dad bought it from June Gaillon.
Now, what was your dad's background? Was he in the lumber industry?
Not at all. Not at all. He was as green as anybody could have started a mill, you know. Never did it before. He was in Connecticut before that. Decided to move back here. He worked odd jobs here and there. And he just decided to buy the mill.
Now, his name was?
Raul.
And so he comes here and he decides he's now going to buy a mill.
He's going to buy a mill, yeah.
It must have been frightening for your family.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was, because he had no idea what he was doing. He was good and mechanically inclined. He could build stuff, he could weld, he could fix things. So that was a plus. So as he started milling, he hired a few people and figured out how things ran over here. And yeah, that's how he started. And he owned the mill for 30 years. And then we worked here as we were kids, you know. We didn't have any school vacation. During school vacation, we had to work. And we didn't have to, we wanted to, you know. And so anyway, when I became old enough to move away from here, I didn't really want nothing to do with the mill. I never thought I'd buy the mill, and 7 years later I moved back from Connecticut and bought it.
So did your dad retire from the mill? Or
he worked for me after I bought it for another 10 years. Yep.
So you were the boss and he was the worker.
Yeah.
Or you were the worker and he was the boss.
Yeah. No, he let me run things the way I wanted. We got along real good. Yep.
Now, was it the same? Were you still working, getting a lot of wood from the farmers?
For a little while, things had slowed down. The farmers were beginning to be few and far apart, you know. And also that meant our business was getting slower and slower. So we had to do different things to keep the place going. For a while we sold hardwood firewood just to keep the guys busy, keep a crew here full time. And then things started picking up again. We started having log home sales and fencing sales as far as cedar. And then we still kept doing stuff for local people, but which was maybe 2 days out of the week. We kept busy with local work. It's been here for 30 years, as far as me.
Now I noticed the mill yard was full. I know this summer you had some all the way
yeah,
to the road.
Yeah, it was packed all the way down to the road, yeah.
So you collect this in the spring, or do you get?
I collect throughout the winter and the spring, early spring.
And how many, roughly, how many cords do you go through? Or is it measured in cords or board feet?
It's measured in both. Okay. Yeah. When a truck comes in, it's measured in weight per ton. You know, we purchase it per ton, and then as we saw it up, we convert it to board feet. It takes 2 tons, basically 2 cords, which is 2.5 tons, makes a cord, and 2 cords for 1,000 feet. That's basically how it's broken down.
That's the formula.
Right.
To it. So in the course of a year, roughly how many board feet?
Probably about 1,400 cords, which would convert to 700 or 800 board feet, 700 or 800,000 board feet.
So what's the future for Tardif's mill?
I'm going to stay like I am. It works. I'm not going to get any bigger. I'm not going to modernize. I like what I do, the way things run right now, so I'm going to stay the same.
When somebody brings in some logs to you and they just sell you the logs, I mean, they don't want the wood, they just sell you the logs.
Right.
How do you determine what logs to cut? You know, and what to cut that?
Well, it depends on the orders that I get. If I get an order for 6x6 beams like those, when I'm loading up the deck inside the mill, I have to go through my pile of logs and get just the right size logs for those pieces of wood. Otherwise, I'm cutting something that I don't need. But there's always some leftover material from orders that we do that unexpectedly had to cut it, you know. In the cedar logs, I use everything. I don't necessarily do local orders. My orders are for the fencing and for the Moosehead Log Home Company. So I already know whatever the log size is good for, I make that size piece of material. If it's good for 6x6, I make that. If it's good for 2x6s, I use it for that. If it's good for a 1x4 or 2x4, that's what gets cut out of it. Pretty simple. But when I'm doing a special order like tamarack logs or spruce logs, and I only need 30 pieces of this and 20 pieces of that, I have to pick out my logs to make sure my time sawing this material, in other words, can I make money doing this order? If I have logs that I don't need to do that order, I can't just take them out of the mill. I have to saw them up into something I don't need. Yeah.
So actually, every log gets used for a purpose.
Right.
I mean, you just sort the logs outside.
Right. If you're sawing up, if somebody orders some 2x10s, you can't take a small log and make a 2x10 out of it. Because it's mainly cut in the winter for one thing, so you can't buy it during the summer. And it's hard to find good cedar, so when you find good cedar you want to buy it. When my dad owned a mill, that my dad used to buy wood from them, do some bartering. There used to be like 250 farmers in the area. You're talking from St. John Road, St. John, St. Francis, Allagash, up that way. Eagle Lake, even further, Winterville, all them areas. When you're going the other way, Slybrook,
Canada, French.
Caribou, Prescal. Farmers would cut their wood off their own land and they'd come here, and from all over the place we'd saw up wood for them.
And so typically when a farmer would do that, would he just want the proceeds from selling you the log, or would he want the finished product.
No, they'd come here because they needed a finished product, so they cut the trees off their own land.
Yeah.
They would come here and we would saw it up for them. And sometimes they couldn't pay us, so we'd barter some extra lumber trees that they had to help pay for what we just did for them.
You have a lot of cedar. What species do you cut? What are the 4 big ones?
The main species is cedar, spruce, and fir. Tamarack is a local wood, native wood, and that would be pretty much the main species.
Over the course of, let's say, the last 4 years, since 2017, what kind of volume have you had in each of those species?
We pretty much saw an average of maybe 700,000 feet in a season. And probably half of it is cedar, and the rest you could split the tamarack and spruce and fir same way at a third each, and then so the logs come in over here. This is called a log deck that's underneath here. I normally have a guy working over here. He helps take off the bark off the trees that are, how could I say, the bark's peeling off already, so it doesn't get caught in the saw as we're sawing it, so it's not dangerous. This is called a carriage.
What's this spindle thing?
That's
Does
just
it have a name or just a thing?
It's just a thing. This will go like that, so we can roll the log on the carriage.
Gotcha.
And when he's got to go by, he just takes it out of the way.
And what's the greatest length you can accommodate on the carriage?
We can saw up to 24 feet.
Do you get many logs of that length anymore?
Not many, just special orders sometimes. my windshield so I can see what I'm doing.
Once the log is on the carriage, you pin it down with these
Right? Those are called dogs. Dogs.
And you operate it from the sawyers?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And they're chain driven? Is it like hydraulic or
These are electric.
electric?
The carriage itself is hydraulic. It goes back and forth hydraulically
Yeah.
and in and out hydraulic.
Does it have to be, I guess it must be, it's constantly in perfect position relative to the blade, right?
It does. It has to be lined. Every spring I need to line everything up, make sure it's good for the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of alignments, should I say.
And when the log is on position, I see often that you push and pull this.
Yes, that's to be able to know the thickness of cut that I'm taking.
Yeah.
That's the scale board over here.
And tell me how that works now.
Everything's different as far as different size pieces. You're cutting different size materials. If you're cutting all boards, you have to include the kerf of the saw. The kerf means the thickness of the tooth.
Yeah.
So when I want to pull to cut a 1-inch board, I have to pull it 1 1/4 inches to include the kerf of the saw. Yeah. We can saw any sizes, 10 by 10s, 12 by 12s. That's what's nice with this mill. It's a custom sawmill. You can pretty much do any size piece versus the big mills. It's all, if it's a stud mill, it's normally just 2 by 4s, 2 by 6s. They cannot make big beams inside the mill.
Yeah. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about where you get your logs, either from farmers or loggers.
Local contractors, logging contractors, yeah.
And if you're, use my term, you're a boutique mill that can produce out the door what your customers want that's unique to them, who are your customers? Apart from farmers who are looking for wood for, you know, building a pen or a greenhouse, whatever. Carpenters, specialty carpenters?
Mostly homeowners.
Really?
Yes. Carpenters, they want to use kiln dried product because they have to warranty their work.
Right.
And homeowners, the people that do stuff themselves, doesn't matter if it's rough sawn lumber, green lumber, they can work with it, you know.
Yeah. Did you do tongue and groove?
I do occasionally, but it's pretty rare because you have to dry all the lumber first.
Yeah.
So you're sitting on that lumber for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
Versus instead of getting paid for it right away.
Yeah.
If it gets sold in the rough and green.
Yeah. When how long do logs stay out in your yard?
5-6 months.
Top end?
Yeah.
Ish? And when you look at a log, like conveniently this one, do you know what you can get out of it?
This here I would make a 6x6, a square 6x6 with it.
Yeah.
Because that's where the demand is. And that goes to a log home company. I sell that to Moosehead Log Homes, and they pass it through a planer mill, which planes off, rounds off one side, double tongue, double groove on the top and bottom, and looks like a finished V-match board on the inside. Yeah.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And apart from the 6x6, what kind of scrap is there? Anything salvageable? Was it all slab wood?
No, sometimes you get boards off the sides when you're downsizing to that size piece. Yeah.
And when you get to the point of sort of having two sides, you know, the way you want it, you know precisely that you can get to 6 inches on the other two sides, no problem.
I know by looking at it, yeah.
Yeah. How long does it take to learn how to do that?
A few years.
Probably more than just a few. Yeah. So Tell me a little, excuse me,
Whoops.
a little bit about the sawyer's chair here. You're responsible for the whole mill while that blade's running, right?
I am. I gotta watch everybody's fingers as, you know, the material's going through, make sure there's no danger of a piece of wood getting caught in the saw and kicking back and hitting this guy over here. And they get two guys up front while the carriage and the log is going through, make sure their hands are out of the way before I go through with that piece. Yeah.
And this is where the magic happens? What is...
This here works stuff on the carriage right here. This is called a taper. So when the log is smaller in one end than the other, you want to try to put it in the middle, get it kind of straight. So there's three of these. There's one here, there's one in the middle, and there's one on the other end. So as I'm loading up the next log, I look at it, okay, that's the small end. So as I'm backing up, I'll start bringing the other one out on the other side.
Do you have a preference to go small end first, the large end first?
Doesn't matter.
It's called a taper?
It's called a taper.
What's that called?
This is called a PV.
PV?
Yeah.
You said it with a French accent.
I know, because I'm French.
How would I spell it?
P-E-A-V-E-Y. So these things hold the log down so the log doesn't move.
The tops.
And then the hydraulics stay there. I won't bump you, don't worry. We'll move the carriage back and forth going through the saw.
So the man working here doesn't want to crush himself with these logs, but he's focused on the next log for you.
He's focused on the next log. Once he rolls that log on there, he's focused on when he has to turn it after I take a few cuts. And he helps me turn it.
And do you say anything, or you just look at him?
I just look at him and he knows what to do.
So when the time to put a new log on, he turns these things we call things, and he uses a PV to roll her on.
Yeah, when their logs are small, you don't really need the PV because they're very light and they're easy to put on.
So he's got it on there, and he thinks he's got it where you want it. Do eye contact with you?
Right. Well, I need to move the carriage. He's got the log out on these things, you want to call them. And he's got them close to the carriage, but that log has to line up with that taper.
Up here?
Right, because that's where I need it on the carriage. Yeah.
So what's the air gap between here and the blade?
3/8 of an inch.
Pretty tight, huh?
Yeah. It's pretty scary when the blade's turning. little bit of taper for the log, so I'm going to bring out that taper here. I lift this up and I'll bring that out a little bit to be exactly where I need it. Yeah. And normally I'll make sure the blade is about up to here when I'm cutting.
Yeah.
So I would front that up a little more. So that's pretty much how that would go through. Let me back it up here a little bit so it don't touch the blade. Then I come back. If I need to take another slice, I pull this forward. That brings the log forward.
And
Do this.
Does each pull?
It's about an inch. About an inch. Yeah. That scale board up there. Usually I go by this part right here,
Yeah.
and I can determine whether I'm taking an inch or 2 inches or quarter inch, whatever.
And when you think you've got 6-inch face,
Yeah.
then you turn it.
Then I'll take it and we'll stop it and turn it over. Cut the other side nice and square. That way you got 2 sides square.
Yeah.
Down to 6-inch.
Yeah.
And then I'll turn it on the bottom, the flat side on the bottom, and I'll take another cut until I think it's right around where I need it. Then we'll flip it one more time,
Yeah.
so that'll make your square 6x6.
And is all that when you have a 6x6, is this what you have estimated by eye, or have you got a ruler down there looking at?
No, I don't need to measure it because that measurement, that scale board is accurate. Yeah. Yeah.
More done? Now, the center of attraction is the blade, eh? Can you tell me about that?
That is called a rotary blade.
Yeah.
Let me turn off the hydraulic unit. And this is the tooth that goes on the saw, like this. There's like a little groove in the saw, so when you're putting in the tooth, it turns it in, and then it secures it.
Can you see that, Tom? Mm-hmm. You're good.
Yep.
Shank tooth.
Right.
Now,
There are different types of teeth. This one is a carbide tooth, and it lasts a lot longer than a regular high-speed steel tooth.
Mm-hmm.
High-speed steel I have to sharpen 4 times a day,
really?
and this I only sharpen once a day. These
Every tooth on the,
Yeah.
the blade. How many teeth on this blade?
I think there's right around 36 teeth. Yeah.
And how long does it take to sharpen?
5 minutes. 5 minutes. You see that rig on the wall right there?
Yeah.
That mounts right on the saw,
Yeah.
and you sharpen one at a time. Yep.
Good. Okay. And I've heard the term tensioning a blade. What does that mean?
That if you overheat your blade, a lot of times you'll have to send it to the saw shop in Bangor and have it tensioned. In the old days, they used to call it hammering the saw.
Uh-huh.
And what that does is when the saw gets hot, it releases some of the tension in the middle, and the saw starts to warp, and it just doesn't run good anymore.
Yeah.
So when you tension it, you got to tension it for the right speed of the saw, whether it's a left-hand saw, right-hand saw, and also it's called tension because it gives the saw tension.
Yeah.
Now, I've never had that saw heat up. I've had it heat up before, and I've had it go crooked, but you think about it, when your saw is all crooked and everything, what caused it to go crooked? It's because it heated up. So I heat it up again and start the saw, the momentum of it, and let it cool down by itself, and the saw will straighten out by itself.
What's the diameter of the saw?
That's a 48-inch saw.
That's a lot of blade.
It's a lot of blade. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
More dangerous than a bandsaw. There's 100 horse turning it in the basement.
Now, a log has come through in its first passage, and I've seen it. And there's a slab pieces come off,
Yeah.
basically. And they flop onto here, and you got a guy down here taking that stuff and cutting it to length, and then salvaging it for firewood, I guess, right?
Yeah, there's some that get salvaged for firewood. The wood scraps that we don't have time to cut up, they end up in the truck here, and we bring them to a guy that chips it for biomass, I guess, and an energy plant. So that's where that goes. Everything gets used.
I was going to say, everything has a value.
Even the sawdust gets used for animal bedding. Yep, everything gets used.
now that the scrap edges are off the sides of, one or two sides of the log, and you're starting to produce actual lumber.
Yeah, that's the first stage of it.
Yeah. And then, so you got a second guy over here. So you got a guy rolling logs.
A guy sawing, which is me.
Yeah. And then,
There's a guy running the edger. This is called edger.
yeah,
Takes the edges, the bark off the edges of the board.
yeah. Now a board comes off. It might have bark on one side or two sides.
Yep.
And you roll it through here.
This machine is called an edger. Once you've taken 2 slices to make a board, there's still bark on the edges of the board. So you will pass that through here to take off the bark.
Will it take it off both sides at the same time?
Yes, it will, yeah.
And can you set it up so it comes out the post edge side at a dimensional width that you want?
Yes, yes. This is what moves the blades right here. You can move it from anywhere from 3 inches to 14 inches. And as you can see, there's one blade inside the machine there that moves back and forth.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other stationary.
The other one's stationary. Now, if you don't have bark on both sides of the board, you can put this down because you have one straight edge.
Yes.
You will put the straight edge against this and it'll take off just one edge. Yep.
So the edger passes the board through. So what comes out is a clean board on 4 sides and 2 scrap edges, or 1 scrap edge.
Yeah, 1 or 2 scrap edges. Those, as you can see right there, those are some of the edges that came off. And we use those to sticker our wood. As you as you pile it there, you get stickers in between your layers of boards, and that way you can dry it that way.
Yeah.
If it's not stickered, it won't dry.
Just like a big hunk of
Right, and it'll
wood.
just be a chunk of wood.
Yeah. But ultimately, something ends up down here.
Yes, the lumber, the rough sawn lumber that does not get planed, we put in this truck here.
And that could be all sorts of dimensions.
Right, all sorts of that. And at the end of the day, we move the truck to where we're piling it, and we have to sort out all the lumber, different dimensions, different pieces.
Yeah. So that's what's out here
Right.
in the yard. But the wood that's here has come through the edger, and now it's in
It's called the planer room,
planer room. Yeah,
which is, there's a planer in that room.
that's a good name.
Yeah. A room for the planer. There you go.
For the planer.
Yep.
And
This is what you call rough sawn lumber. It's not planed.
yeah. And so when it's time to, you've accumulated, a day or 3 days or a week's worth of lumber.
Right, when there's enough to be worthwhile to start the planer.
Yeah.
When,
So when you have enough and you're ready to begin a campaign to plane this wood, I've seen you, the sawyer, become the planer.
Right, the planer man.
Right, planer man. And the edge man becomes the feeder to the planer. Could be anybody. But
Yeah, it could be anybody, yeah.
yeah, basically.
Yep.
And then,
So there will be 2 guys, one guy standing here, one guy at the planer, because he's helping the guy to pick up the lumber to pass it through the planer.
right.
And there's 2 guys outside piling.
So as you're planing, so some of this is will become 4x4, some will become what?
2x4s, 2x6s.
Yeah.
Some of that's going to be decking material, tamarack decking.
And so the planer, you set the planer to the end size, the ultimate size you want? Is that right?
Well, I mean, you can't,
Or do you just kind of
when you're
do
passing a
what you do?
2x4, you got to set it for 2x4s. You're going to set it at 3 5/8 by 1 3/4, because that's what we normally
Yeah.
finish it at.
And will it plane the top and the bottom at the same time?
All 4
All
sides.
4 sides. Really? Yeah. And that's where a lot of the sawdust comes out. I mean, I've seen from the aerial
Yeah.
photos that
The material that
So-
comes off of the planer is called shavings.
shavings. And Do you salvage the sawdust?
Sawdust
From-
and the shavings gets blown outside,
Yeah.
and it's all mixed together, sawdust, shavings, and that's what they use for animal bedding.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Al the farmer now, and I brought you 15 logs,
Yeah,
and I want each one to give me a 6x6 and all the 2x4s and 2x6s you can give me.
Okay.
So I bring my logs in and I drop them where?
you drop them off in the yard. Most likely I'll have to help you unload them
Yeah.
because
They're heavy.
they're heavy. Yeah. I'll be asking you, is there any metal or hardware in those logs? Especially if you told me it was cut near a house
Yeah.
or a house lot. So,
Something as simple as barbed wire that was once used as fencing cause a problem?
big problem.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, the saw will cut through it, but it will damage the teeth.
Yeah.
And if anything gets wrapped around the saw, it could be dangerous for the guys working
Sure.
here. Yeah.
I never thought of that.
Oh, there's a lot of things. We've hit railroad spikes, screws, bullets. The bullets don't damage the saw though. But railroad spike, that one time cost me $1,800 to get my saw fixed.
Really? And plus the time you were...
Plus the time lost. Well, I had a spare saw, so I didn't lose too much time. But the thing is, you're going to get back on the saw and finish sawing the other logs, wondering, is there any more? Is there any more in there?
Yeah.
It's scary.
So Al the farmer has cut down his trees, trimmed them, and got them sized. He brings them to you, and they've been, 6 weeks since they were cut, let's say. Is that too soon to begin milling?
No, that's fine. We can mill them the following day if you want.
Really? And then I come in at the right time, according to your schedule, and I See how much stuff come through the planer in there?
Right, we have to schedule it so I have time to saw your logs.
Sure.
And also you have to schedule it so you have time to be here with your trailer so we can load you up as we're sawing.
Right.
So you don't have to go back and forth in the road,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, yeah.
Well, apart from the farmer who came because he's building a new shed out back, you've got a lot of lumber accumulated out here. Now, I take it that's from logs you purchased
Right,
and have turned into product for retail sale, right?
yeah.
So can we kind of take a look out there? Maybe, how long is that beam?
That one's 20 feet long. That's an 8x8, 20 feet long.
That's a nice piece of wood.
Yeah, big piece. It weighs 300 pounds.
And some enthusiastic beam carpenter is going to come by and buy that.
Well, somebody ordered it. He's supposed to pick it up on Monday.
Big piece of wood.
Yeah, he's jacking up an old house or a camp or something, and instead of having a splice, he wanted the full 20 feet. Now, you can't get that in town.
Anywhere.
No,
You can't even special order. So, what's the species?
that's tamarack.
And tamarack, as I understand it, it isn't going to rot if it's wet.
It's pretty durable outside.
Will it hold its shape?
It will hold its shape. It will rot if you're sitting on wet ground.
Yeah.
Any wood will, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And so the remainder here, this inventory is available to anyone who walks in and says, I need, 15 8-foot 4x4s, right?
Yeah, well, not this stuff here, but we have the same material over there in those piles.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're not strapped, they're loose. So if anybody wants anything that's over there, they can.
What's the distinction then? Why is this?
This is going to be sold. It's already sold to a fencing company.
Uh-huh.
So it's all packaged and ready to be shipped. It's all rough sawn. It needs to go through the planer mill and be planed, and the ends need to be precisely trimmed. Yep.
That's on the customers.
That's on the fencing customers' part. Yeah.
But this is what you have basically in stock for all comers.
Those square pieces go to a log home company, Moosehead Log Homes in Greenville, Maine. That gets shipped out. If I don't sell it locally, it gets shipped out. It's all sold. Yeah.
Can you sell everything you mill without question?
Every spring we start out with about 700,000 feet not sawed up in the yard in logs, and by fall time everything's been sold.
So you'll be buying through the winter.
I'll be buying a lot of cedar throughout the winter, probably 30 to 40 loads.
First mill in town was 1825, Savage Mill. It was right across the river there. So 1825 Savage Mill opened up, and all the way up to Guyonne, Corvo, Tardif, the whole time there's been milling going on in one form or another here in Fort Kent.
Yeah.
The town traces its establishment to 1829 with Mr. Joseph Nadeau. Joseph Nadeau. So actually, milling in town is older than the town itself. Quite an interesting story.
Right.
Yeah, but the short part of that is that in 18 months' time, it'll be the bicentennial anniversary of milling in Fort Kent. That's a phenomenal thing, and it still goes on. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.